We're going to talk mainly today about what I call weaponized food. That is, quite literally, food that has been designed to exterminate our species, the human species, en masse. And I'll go ahead and introduce the topic a little bit here with my opening remarks, using a few recent headlines for illustration. Just a few days ago, on May 10th, a very disturbing story was published in England's Daily Mail with the headline, "The Infertility Time Bomb. Are Men Facing Rapid Extinction?" It was a long article, so I'm just going to read you the most salient passages. Here goes. 1 in 5 men could suffer from fertility problems, and scientists have warned that it's just going to get worse. There's a crisis brewing, but it has nothing to do with the economic deficit or the current political uncertainty. Scientists are warning that rising levels of male infertility have become so perilous that it is a serious public health issue, and some go even further. Professor Niels Sakebak of the University of Copenhagen describes the issue as, quote, as important as global warming. Last week, one science writer even suggested in starkly terrifying terms that if scientists from Mars were to study the male reproductive system, they would possibly conclude that man was destined for rapid extinction. And if it continues, this trend could indicate men are on a path to becoming completely infertile within a few generations. Reports claim that as many as 1 in 5 healthy young men between the ages of 18 and 25 produce abnormal sperm counts. Only 5 to 15% of their sperm is good enough to be classed as normal under World Health Organization rules, proving that infertility is not just a female problem. Indeed, among those experiencing difficulty with conception, a male fertility problem is considered important in about 40% of couples. Factors such as women eating a lot of beef during pregnancy, which means they have consumed a diet rich in polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are potentially damaging chemicals, to the issue of obesity during pregnancy and a woman's exposure to smoke, pesticides, traffic fumes, plastics, and even soybeans, are all thought to have a bearing on a male fetus's future fertility. Now, this article just stood right out to me because only a few days earlier I had read another article from Salem News, published right here in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon, and this was written by April Scott, a former copywriter and online editor for KATU News. She writes, "Today, Salem News reports that a joint experiment by Russia's National Association for Gene Security and the Institute of Ecological and Evolutional Problems has revealed that hamsters fed genetically modified foods produce grandchildren that are unable to produce fourth-generation offspring." Scientist Alexei Surov described the experiment, in which they monitored the behavior, weight gain, and birth rate of several groups of hamsters. Upon birth of the second generation, they noted slower rates of growth and sexual maturity. The next generation was unable to produce. This article then goes on to describe other health effects of GMO foods brought to light in the first lab study on the matter conducted at UC Berkeley in 1996, which showed, quote, stunted growth, impaired immune systems, bleeding stomachs, abnormal and potentially cancerous cell growth in the intestines, impaired blood cell development, misshaped cell structures in the liver, pancreas, and testicles, altered gene expression and cell metabolism, liver and kidney lesions, partially atrophied livers, inflamed kidneys, less developed organs, reduced digestive enzymes, high blood sugar, inflamed lung tissue, increased death rates, and higher offspring mortality as well. But this was just a study of vegetables grown from Monsanto's Roundup Ready seeds. Monsanto is a gigantic international agriculture firm that now produces over 90% of the seeds grown on farms for food in America, and they dominate the world as well. The reason why they are so large is because they built their company through the marketing of the world's most successful pesticide, Roundup, and now they've taken over the seed market with their patented GMO seeds that are created to resist this pesticide so that the pests die, but the plant doesn't. Unfortunately, the negative health effects observed in the lab rats proves that this seeming advantage comes at too heavy a price. But if that wasn't bad enough, Monsanto is now making seeds that have been modified so that they only produce fruit once, so that the seeds of that plant won't grow another plant, so that there's no generation, no propagation, no reproduction. This is to enforce their copyright on the seeds, which by law prohibits farmers from using the seeds of the plants they grow with Monsanto GMO seeds, thus forcing them to make a new purchase from Monsanto every year. So although the Roundup-resistant crops, and indeed the Roundup pesticide itself, now used more liberally than ever before, were already having a negative impact on health, including fertility, this new development has brought it to a new level of devastation. As the Russian rat studies discussed in the Salem News article prove, and as the human fertility studies at the University of Copenhagen discussed in the Daily Mail article prove, we humans, by eating this stuff, are now having our genes altered so that we cannot propagate. We're going to cut to a commercial now, but there's a lot more I have to say on this topic, so we'll get more into it when we get back. Stay tuned.
This is William H. Kennedy, and I would like to extend this personal invitation for you to visit my webpage, williamhkennedy.com, where you will find the best information on paranormal and occult topics in the world. The Occult History Multimedia page at williamhkennedy.com has hours of free documentary films, audios, and ebooks on esoteric subjects, including Hermeticism, Kabbalah, alchemy, the Da Vinci Code, mysticism, Knights Templar, Freemasonry, and much more. Please visit williamhkennedy.com for the best in esoteric subjects.
Hey, welcome back to The Invisible Hand. You know, it's funny to me, but if you think about it, for the first time in history, most of us go about our lives behaving as though there is no future. Not that there isn't a tomorrow for us, but I mean for future generations. Most of us believe that our children and grandchildren are basically doomed, for a variety of reasons, and that causes us to be short-sighted, concerned only with short-term gain, or short-term maintenance of the status quo. I think that this is a major factor in how we set our priorities, and why we tolerate things that damage our health, environment, civil liberties, economic security, and quality of life. People often make remarks about how the world is going to hell. I've heard several of the elderly people I know express relief that they're going to be dead soon, so that they won't have to live through the future that they've left for their children and grandchildren. And I think most of them sense, intrinsically, that those grandchildren's children won't be having children. Somewhere, subconsciously, they've made peace with that, accepted it, forgiven themselves for any role they might have had in it. We all know and have accepted on some level that our economic system is based on borrowing money from private banks, and primarily pledging as collateral for these loans the slave labor of our descendants. The Social Security scheme primarily benefited one generation of Americans, the children of the generation that created it. In reality, it only benefited the banks that administrate it. But I mean, as far as the citizenry is concerned, only one, maybe two generations of Americans will have drawn Social Security checks by the time it collapses, but will be paying the price for it for generations to come, if there are in fact any generations to come. But most people have known for decades now that the system was unsustainable, and that it was going to blow up before their children ever got to enjoy the supposed benefits of it. But American seniors, by far the largest and most powerful voting bloc, and the holders of the largest amount of wealth, kept voting to retain the system, because they wanted to get their piece of it. They didn't really care what happened to their descendants, and I believe it's because, in the back of their minds, they'd already written their children off as having no future anyway. But nobody wants to admit that they think that, or why they think that. There's quite a number of different belief systems popular today, which teach humans to believe that the end is near. There are the various apocalyptic end-time cults of the Christian and Shiite Muslim variety, along with those who are into the Mayan calendar, or who think that the planet Nibiru is going to come around and cause a pole shift, and or that the Anunnaki aliens are going to come back and either kill or enslave us. There are those with more, quote, scientific apocalypse theories who believe in global warming and overpopulation, and things like that. And of course there are all sorts of things beyond our control that could happen to kill us all, like asteroids or comets or giant sun flares. And we know there have been pole shifts in the past, but it's uncertain what caused them. These are all things that are not really worth worrying about, because if they happen, there's really nothing you can do about it. But why is it that we feel the compulsion to believe in these things? And why do we behave as though we have no future? I think it's because of an underlying reality that few of us are willing to admit to ourselves. I think it has to do with the weaponized food that we're eating, and other artificial environmental contaminants that seem designed to sterilize, lobotomize, and kill us. I've already discussed the problems with genetically modified crops. That's corn and soybeans, etc., which are found in almost everything we eat. Then you've got GMO meat and dairy. They're engineering cows and chickens to produce more meat, more milk, bigger eggs, etc. And the chickens have breasts so big now that they can't stand up. And the cows are getting infections in their mammary glands, so now there's a high index of pus in the milk that we drink. And one of the things that comes to my mind is that people have been eating this stuff for many years now. And the obesity epidemic is so huge now, it makes me wonder if eating meat from cows and chickens, with genes that have been changed to give them abnormally large breasts and abdomens, isn't in fact having the same effect on us. Then there are the ingredients in processed foods, the worst of which I think are aspartame and high fructose corn syrup. These are both artificial sweeteners. Aspartame is made up from the waste of genetically modified E. coli bacteria and causes all sorts of health problems, including Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, birth defects, and brain tumors. It's found in diet soda and other low-fat, low-calorie desserts. High fructose corn syrup is used almost universally now in place of sugar in soda and juice. And it's known to have high levels of mercury in it because of the manufacturing process. It also causes obesity much more rapidly than regular sugar. Now there seems to be a battle going on between the corporations that produce weaponized food and anyone who tries to offer an alternative. These companies are using their influence on government to make it almost impossible for people to avoid using their products. They basically want to prevent people from being self-sufficient and making their own food choices. So there are laws in places throughout the country right now against selling raw milk, selling homegrown vegetables, or even having a home garden at all. Now there's a social Darwinist self-regulating caste system that's being created here, where the lower classes are being slowly weeded out of the population over 2 or 3 generations because they can't afford organic food. They don't have the ability to go to the places where it's sold, and they aren't educated about why they should. The upper classes have a much better chance of making it, but they are by no means safe. It's very difficult and time-consuming to avoid weaponized food, and you can almost never be certain that your food supply is pure. But let's face it, because of the economic collapse, governments and the banks that own them are fleecing Americans like never before, to the point of total devastation. They have already begun the process of seizing pension funds. Anyone with an income is going to be taxed into poverty. Those with no income will be criminalized and turned into slave labor in prison camps. It's already happening. Within a couple of years, there will be no middle class, no upper middle class, and no nouveau riche. There will be only the 1% at the top, the billionaires from old world money families, and the rest of us. The yuppies of today won't be able to buy kettle chips and Newman's Own in a couple of years. They'll be standing in a bread line, taking whatever they can get. And what they're going to get is a fresh, steaming hot cup full of death. That's right, you see, the consequences of being apathetic and ignorant and uninvolved and selling your species into slavery for petty, short-term gain is coming not in some faraway, distant future in Never Never Land that only your kids will have to experience. No, it's coming to you, right now. A couple of weeks ago, I finally saw the movie 2012 that came out in 2009, about a pole shift that wipes out most life on Earth. And in the plot for this movie, the governments of the world knew that this was coming, and so they told no one except their own cronies and buddies. And they planned in advance a way to save themselves and their friends by using what they called arks, referring to Noah's Ark. They used the same concept, and even the same term, ark, in the movie Deep Impact from 1998, about a comet hitting the Earth. In Deep Impact, the arks were subterranean cities. In 2012, they were submarines. And in both movies, the main characters somehow managed to be among the chosen few to survive the catastrophe. The thing is that there are already such plans in place in reality. It's called continuity of government, and there really are underground facilities built in case of a disaster, whether natural or man-made, in which an alternative government and society, populated only by those they deem worthy, will be allowed to flourish while the rest of us die. And guess what? You don't have a ticket on board the Ark. You are going down with the rest of us unless you stand up. We'll be back after these messages with my interview with James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com.